Chapter 12 of the Madman and the Pirate. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Lucy Burgoyne. The Madman and the Pirate by R. M. Ballantyne. Chapter 12. No sooner had Orlando and the negro passed round the cliff to which Rosco had directed them than they beheld a sight which was well calculated to fill them with anxiety and alarm. For there stood Zeppa, panting and wrestling with one of the fiends that were in the habit of assailing him. The fiend, on this occasion, was familiar enough to him, the stout branch of a tree which overhung his cave, but which his delirious brain had transformed into a living foe. No shout or cry issued from the poor man's compressed lips. He engaged in the deadly struggle with that silent resolve of purpose which was natural to him. The disease under which he laboured had probably reached its climax, for he swayed to and fro, in his futile efforts to wrench off the limb, with a degree of energy that seemed more than human. His partially naked limbs showed the knotted muscles standing out rigidly, his teeth were clenched and exposed, his bloodshot eyes glared, the long, curling and matted hair of his head and beard was flying about in wild disorder, and his labouring chest heaved as if he fiercely, silently and hopelessly struggled. Oh, it was a terrible picture to be presented thus suddenly to the gaze of a loving son. "Stay where you are, Ebony, I must meet him alone," whispered Orlando. Then, hastening forward with outstretched arms, he exclaimed, "Father!" Instantly Zeppa let go his supposed enemy and turned round. The change in his aspect was as wonderful as it was sudden. The old, loving gentle expression overspread his features, and the wild fire seemed to die out of his eyes as he held out both hands. "Ah, once more, my son," he said, in the tenderest of tones, "come to me. This is kind of you, Orley, to return so soon again. I had not expected you for a long time. Sit down beside me, and lay your head upon my knee, so. I like to have you that way, for I see you better." "Oh, father, dear father!" said Orlando, but the words were choked in his throat, and tears welled from his eyes. "Yes, Orley," said Zeppa, with a startled look of joyful surprise, while he turned his head a little to one side, as if listening in expectancy. "Speak again, dear boy, speak again." "I have often seen you since you went to the spirit land, but have never heard you speak till to-day. Speak once more, dear boy." But Orley could not speak. He could only hide his face in his father's bosom and sob aloud. "Nay, don't cry, lad. You never did that before. What do you mean? That is unmanly. Not like my courageous boy was wont to be. And you have grown so much since last I saw you. Why, you've even got a beard. Who ever heard of a bearded man sobbing like a child? And now I look at you closely I see that you have grown wonderfully tall." "It is very strange, but all things seem strange since I came here. Only, in all the many visits you have paid me, I have never seen you change till to-day. You have always come to me in the old boyish form. Very, very strange. But, Orley, my boy," and here Zeppa's voice became intensely earnest and pleading, "you won't leave me again, will you? Surely they can well spare you from the spirit world for a time, just a little while. It would fill my heart with such joy and gratitude. And I'm your father, Orley. Surely I have a right to you, more right than the angels have, haven't I? And then it would give me such joy if you came back to your dear mother, whom I have not seen for so long, so very long." "I will never leave you, father, never!" cried Orlando, throwing his arms round Zeppa's neck, and embracing him passionately. "Nay, then, you are going to leave me," cried Zeppa, with sudden alarm, as he clasped Orlando to him with an iron grip. "You always embrace me when you are about to vanish out of my sight. But you shall not escape me this time. I have got you tighter than I ever had you before, and no fiend shall separate us now. No fiend," he repeated in a shout, glaring at a spot in the bushes where Ebony, unable to restrain his feelings, had unwittingly come into sight. Suddenly changing his purpose, Zeppa let go his son, and sprang like a tiger on the supposed fiend. Ebony went down before him like a bulrush before the hurricane, but, unlike it, he did not rise again. The madman had pinned him to the earth and was compressing his throat with both hands. It required all the united strength of his son and the negro to loosen his grasp, and even that would not have sufficed had not the terrible flame which had burned so long died out. It seemed to have been suddenly extinguished by this last burst of fury, for Zeppa fell back as helpless as an infant in their hands. Indeed, he lay so still with his eyes closed that Orlando trembled with fear lest he should be dying. "Now, Ebony," said he, taking the negro apart, when they had made the exhausted man as comfortable as possible on his rude couch in the cave, "you run down to the ship and fetch the doctor here without delay. I will be able to manage him easily when alone. Run as you never ran before. Don't let any soul come here except the doctor and yourself. Tell the captain I have found him, through God's mercy, but that he is very ill, and must be carefully kept from excitement, and that in the meantime nobody is to disturb us. The doctor will of course fetch physic, and tell him to bring his surgical instrument also, for, if I mistake not, poor Rosco needs his attention. Do bring up as much in the way of provisions as you can carry, and 1 or 2 blankets. And, harkee, make no mention of the pirate to anyone. Away!" During the delivery of this message, the negro listened eagerly, and stood quite motionless, like a black statue, with the exception of his glittering eyes. "Yes, massa," he said at its conclusion, and almost literally vanished from the scene. Orlando then turned to his father. The worn-out man still lay perfectly quiet, with closed eyes, and countenance so pale that the dread of approaching death again seized on the son. The breathing was, however, slow and regular, and what appeared to be a slight degree of moisture lay on the brow. The fact that the sick man slept soon became apparent, and when Orlando had assured himself of this he arose, left the cave with careful tread, and glided, rather than walked, back to the place where the pirate had been left. There he still lay, apparently much exhausted. "We have found him, thank God," said Orlando, seating himself on a bank, "and I would fain hope that the worst is over, for he sleeps. But, poor fellow, you